Hello and welcome to today's meeting of Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine, and I'm the president of Democrats of Greater Tucson, and I'll be your host today. And let me introduce very quickly our speaker today, Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, who is running for Pima County Recorder. Hello, Gabriella.
Hi there, thank you for having me.
Most welcome. Let me introduce Gabriella Cázares-Kelly. She's running for Pima County Recorder. She is a public school educator, a community organizer, and a leader in the Democratic Party. And she's also a longtime voting rights champion. And from rural and elderly voters who struggle with voter ID requirements to college students, disabled voters, and disenchanted tribal voters, she is working to represent all of Pima County. She has 6 points on her platform, and that includes commitment to community needs, expansion of early voter opportunities, ballot drop boxes across Pima County, ballot text receipt confirmation, a 21st century document recordation, and she's been an advocate for automatic and same-day registration. Gabby, the floor is yours.
Well, skuktash, everybody. Skuktash, Anya Nyapchugi, Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, Bisin Mo'o Chukuk Amjud. Good day, everybody. My name is Gabriella Cázares-Kelly. I'm from the communities of Bisin Mo'o and Cook, which are located on the Tohono O'odham Nation right here in beautiful Pima County. I'm a lifelong Pima County resident, and I first started this entire journey simply by doing what many of you all do, which is going out to register voters. I worked in Tohono O'odham Community College, which is a public school. It's a public community college here in Pima County, chartered first under Pima and now has its own accreditation. And I simply wanted to register voters. I thought it was going to take maybe 2 afternoons. And what I started finding was that there were these blocks, these barriers, when I was asking people whether or not they were registered. I was asking tribal members, are you registered to vote? Some of you may or may not know that tribal communities often have their own election system. So asking somebody, are you registered to vote in a Native community can actually mean 2 things. Are they registered for tribal elections or state and federal? And so recognizing that we were unsure even how of the language that we were using was really important. We started recognizing that rural students and rural and tribal voters, so not only just Native Americans, but people just living in rural communities, were also struggling with some of the physical address requirements. So they would look at the form and literally not know how to fill out the form because they utilize a PO box. And so describing where they live in an area that's maybe the size of Connecticut, where most people don't know even exists, how were they conveying where their home was? And so they were really struggling. I ran into college students who were often displaced. You might have heard me talking about my own 2 children. Living situation for college students is often very confusing, and it can change very quickly. Sometimes there's people sleeping on couches, various forms of houselessness for students in that young age group. And we were seeing so much of that, where parents would suddenly have an empty nest and they would move to a different state or move to a different town, leaving that student who lived in the dorm without any way of having a permanent address that's linked on paper. We were seeing tribal members who were struggling with the 2.5 hour, maybe more, 3 hour, 4 hour drive from where they lived to the closest motor vehicle division, who maybe did not have a state ID or a driver's license and had no need for one. One of the other things, the last things that I was constantly, and I'm sure any of you who've ever done voter registration, you have encountered people with felonies who don't understand their rights. And so by encountering all of these groups of people, I started making phone calls and started calling the recorder's office, trying to find out what is the best way to help. What's the best way to explain this? Who can we connect people with? And some of the questions that I was asking had never been asked before. So sometimes the recorder's office, they would maybe transfer me to another person, or they would have to email me back an answer. I was very persistent. And so I've since developed a relationship with this office by asking questions that they had never thought to be asked before. And so every time I would call, they would learn something and I would learn something. And I was really interested because it wasn't so simple simply to get people registered to vote or to participate in early voting. And so throughout my research, as I started getting more and more interested into what the barriers were for people to register to vote and participate in early voting, I started looking at some of my own family history. For me, my grandmother has been a great inspiration to my entire campaign. Her name is Catherine Jose Maria. My grandmother, Catherine Jose Maria, was born in 1918. So this is my grandma. This is the one who put Band-Aids on my knees when I skinned them or bought me ice cream at the grocery store. My grandma. So not a whole bunch of generations back, just my grandma. She was born in 1918, but because she was born Tohono O'odham, she was not considered a United States citizen until 1924, which we're coming up on women's suffrage in 1920, 2020 centennial of women having the right to vote. It's very important to recognize that my grandmother and my community, we weren't a part of that. It doesn't mean that it's not a great achievement, because it was very much danger and violence and death associated with women having the right to vote, but that did not include the Native community. We actually did not get the right to vote until 2 World War II veterans, combat veterans, came back from the war. They tried to register. They were denied. They sued the state of Arizona, and in 1948, when my grandmother was 30 years old, Native Americans got the right to vote in Arizona. But that didn't mean that we had the right to be protected, that our rights were actually going to be upheld and our votes would be cast. We were still subject to literacy tests or discrimination or intimidation, or simply just being denied being able to vote. This morning we're watching as the late John Lewis is being laid to rest, still having those conversations about the effects of his work and what it led to. 1964 Civil Rights Act helped move the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which gave my grandmother those rights to be able to vote and to be protected. Haba in Huripa, Bismarck Merganyok, my grandmother didn't speak English. And so she didn't have rights to protect her or rights to a translator until 1975, which really wasn't that long ago. And so when we talk about who is participating in voting and who has it ingrained in their culture and who doesn't, and why people are choosing not to participate, we really have to acknowledge that there have been systemic barriers for many groups, and we are not all starting from the same starting line. Right now in our county, or in our whole country actually, and even internationally, we're seeing a great civil unrest. We're seeing so many people pushing up against even just the idea of voting and participating. We're at a crisis where it's not enough to just simply be anti-Trump. It's not enough to not be Trump. For us to encourage people to get registered to vote and to participate. We're dealing with a lot of communities who are feeling left behind by this voting process, who are angry, who are disenchanted, and not just the Native American community. I'm seeing that throughout the country. But certainly the Native American community is one that has been garnering a lot of attention. The Arizona Democratic Party has actually hired a Native American outreach coordinator. Nationally, the Democratic Party has hired a Native American outreach coordinator. That's simply because they're recognizing that this community in particular that has been left behind, who often does vote Democratic, would be a changing factor in our government. In Pima County, we have a similar position. In the Pima County Recorder's Office, there are two positions that are mandated by law, a Pascua Yaqui outreach coordinator and a Tohono O'odham outreach coordinator. And their jobs are to reach out to community and build relationships and address some of the needs that are particular to those communities. I applied for the Tohono O'odham outreach coordinator position about 2 years ago. I went through 2 rounds of interviews, including a Tohono O'odham language test, which is for anybody who has ever worked in Native communities, they know that is very strange, very odd. I've worked in Native communities in education for about 14 years, and I have never once had a Tohono O'odham language test or any kind of language test as a prerequisite to a job. Usually that's a sign-on bonus, like, oh, you can speak an additional language, you have this additional skill, we're going to pay you additional money. But so to go through a language test as a prerequisite to a job is very odd, which I did because I really wanted to have that position. I was really excited about voter registration, about early voting, about learning more about the office and how we could create positive community change. And so after 2 rounds of interviews, I met with the current recorder. And of course, I was I was offered the position. I was actually on the spot because I'm amazing. But the position had been advertised on a scale of $14 an hour to $33 an hour, dependent on education and experience. I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona. I have a master's degree from Northern Arizona University. At the time, I had 12 years experience working in Native American communities, specifically the Tohono O'odham community, and I just passed the O'odham language test. But I was told I could start at $14 an hour. They would not take any of my education or any of my experience into account, which was not enough money for me to take care of my family. So I had to turn it down. And that position, which had been open for 2 years, stayed open for another 2 years, which means that there were 4 years where we have missed opportunities for voters, for direct contact with voters, and also 4 years of missed relationship building that are gone. And so when I have been in democratic spaces, we have this constant conversation of where are the Native Americans? Where are the Latinos? Where are the young people? And we have to acknowledge that not only are we not including people, we are also creating barriers for them to participate. What a real leader would have done would have been to reclassify a position. It would have been to create a consultancy. It would have been to hire in a different area and reassign those those job duties to include the specialized knowledge that I have. But instead, I had to walk away from that position, which meant an entire community missed out. And for all of us who are doing this work in the community to reach out to those communities, you know, this hurt you as well. I was told that we could not reclassify, because if we did, no one would be able to meet the minimum qualifications. And so I unfortunately don't have the direct experience in this office that I would love to have, but it doesn't mean that I didn't try. And when I heard that FN was going to retire after 28 years in this office, my immediate thought was not to run for this office. My immediate thought was, great, I'm going to have to reach out to the next person, and I'm going to have to educate them on all of the things that I've learned, all of the things that need to be put as a priority. I'm going to have to hope that the person that is coming in is not a white supremacist, that is not trying to block the Native vote, that cares about rural and tribal communities, and that is talking about the issues that I'm addressing. So my immediate thought was, great, this is more work for me. And then I realized the only way that I can ensure that is to put myself in this position and to reprioritize what this office has been doing. That's not to say that I plan to go in and just wipe everything out. This office, and I will give FN some, much due credit of, she has created a machine. And this machine has kept our elections moving smoothly for very many years. And we have a ton of institutional knowledge within this office that will support someone coming in. No matter what happens, change and transition are going to be difficult. That is going to be difficult for whoever comes in. That is the nature of change. People are often resistant to it. I do have my master's degree in educational leadership through Northern Arizona University, which had an emphasis on institutional change. I have been a part of reaccreditations, which are very stressful situations. 2 of them through the community college level, as well as an entire campus move. So I'm very much aware of how to implement those types of changes within an institution that specifically brings in stakeholders. I think that is something that is very important, and to trust in the people who are doing the day-to-day work. A lot of the questions that I have received prior to this talk have really been about the nitty-gritties of management. Management is important, and this is partially a management position, but really what I am talking about is leadership. And the difference being what we're putting priorities on and where we can be the most effective. If we want to do things, if we want to have any kind of change in the system that we are already seeing, if we want things to be different, we have to do them differently. We have to include different people. And so I'm giving you the opportunity when you are asking, where are these Native communities? Where are the Latino communities? Where are the youth? They're with my campaign. We have had such a tremendous response to our campaign. If anybody has been following our social media, we have 4 times the amount that the current recorder's office has on a campaign page, which the significance of that, to have that many followers, means that the information that we are putting out is exponential, and it goes out times 10. So for every like that you see, there are 10 likes that you don't. And so if you have 4,000 followers on social media versus 1,000, you're going to see much more of an impact. One of the things that I am particularly skilled at is being able to create a sense of urgency surrounding issues and push them to change. I have relationships with legislators. I have been endorsed by Senator Victoria Steele, House Minority Leader Charlene Fernandez, Representative Andres Cano, even just within the state of Arizona. And I have other legislators who have been reaching out to me, who also support me, or who I have day-to-day relationships with. And so making sure that we are pushing for what the priorities of our community really are. Larry mentioned some of my talking points, and I want to make sure that I do share that information for anybody who is not aware. One of, I think, the most exciting things, and it's been really, especially in this time of COVID, where we have such a disconnection of people being able to physically come in and ask questions, or where we're able to go out to community hubs and talk to people who might not know this information. Making sure that we are connecting and communicating with our voters, with our constituents, is of utmost importance. And so utilizing a system such as text message confirmations, which is something that Maricopa County is already doing, which is a wonderful system. They send out a text message to let you know when your ballots have been mailed to you. This creates two things. Number one, it creates a sense of excitement of, oh, your ballot is on the way. Ooh, I'm going to get to vote soon. Second is it creates a sense of accountability. So if that ballot does not arrive, people know that something is wrong, and they know that it is up to them to reach out to the recorder's office to find out why, or to look through their stack of mail at home, or whatever it is. When you return your ballot, you would then receive a text message that says you received your ballot, and when it is been counted and it is accepted, that it has been accepted into the system. This is especially important for so many of our voters who often feel as if we chase the vote and then absolutely do not follow up with them afterwards. Yes, there is an ability for you to go to the website currently, and I encourage you to do that. If you've voted by mail, please go to recorder.pima.gov and check it out and see if your ballot has made it where it needs to go. But often, we're struggling with people who have limited internet access, or are only accessing it on their phone, or maybe are in an area with low bandwidth. And so having that information come to them is a double reassurance that their vote has counted. And we hear that narrative over and over. Well, my vote doesn't count. It didn't even matter. I'm not a part of that system. And if, when we talk about how much a vote matters, I live in Congressional District 2, which was held by Gabrielle Giffords, who was, of course, brutally shot, and her position was taken over by Ron Barber. And when Ron Barber ran for re-election, he lost by 167 votes. His 167 votes enabled Martha McSally to achieve a position of prominence, which put her into power. And although we quickly learned that she was unwilling to meet with constituents unless they wanted to pay $100 or more for a ticket, she was unwilling to meet, unwilling to discuss, and she was just a very bad representative in general. But on top of that, what it did was it allowed her to have that position of prominence and allowed her to get the name recognition so that she could then go on to run for the Senate. And although she lost, she was still appointed. And now she's running for re-election. And whether or not she wins, she still has achieved enough prominence as as this xenophobic hate spewing machine, that she is now, you know, going to the border to sign the xenophobic border wall in the middle of a pandemic. You know, that's where her priorities are. And that, you know, it's 167 votes that ultimately got her there. And so when we talk about the importance of making sure that people understand that their vote counts, we have to communicate with them that yes, it did. We have to thank them for voting. We have to continue to communicate with them and make sure that we're meeting their needs. And if there's a reason that that they haven't, their vote was received but not counted, or if there's any issues, that person knows and isn't flying blind. So text confirmations might sound like a matter of convenience, but really it's part of a larger movement that we need to ensure that we're communicating well with our constituents. Ballot drop boxes are something, we could have these today. Ballot drop boxes that would be so beneficial for us in this time where we are discouraging people from connecting with one another, but people are uncomfortable putting their ballots in the mail. People are worried about those dates and those deadlines. And we also have to address the needs of working people. People who are working either unconventional hours, who are either busy Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or 7 to 7, or who are struggling otherwise to make it to a voting location without being able to, or an early voting location, and who would otherwise be uncomfortable dropping their ballot off in the regular postal mail. There's some huge narratives that are going that shift that. I also talk about accessibility quite a lot. So if you have noticed with my campaign, we try to make it as accessible as possible. We try to offer captions as often as we can for all of our videos, even our live feeds. We usually have somebody typing away live right there on the spot. And we use image descriptions in this time where we are relying so much more on the use of technology and the ways in which people communicate. We have to make sure that we are including communities who are utilizing e-readers, who are dependent on other forms of communication, and making sure that we standardize that type of communication. When we look at the website right now for Pima County Recorder, it's very PDF heavy, which means that there's a lot of pictures on this website. This is a mild annoyance for someone like me who goes to the recorder's office website almost every day. And if I want to make a graphic to share information and I want to copy and paste something, often I do that, and then I'm like, oh, it's a PDF, it's a picture. And I can't copy and paste because you cannot copy and paste from a photo. Which is essentially what a PDF is. That's a mild annoyance for me. But when you are dependent on an e-reader, that means that information, the crucial information that is connected with your rights as a United States citizen to participate in our democracy, what that means is that information is blocked from you. One of the things that I've also talked about is the Spanish language version, and I have been corrected. There is a Spanish language version, but there's only a Spanish language web version. In this time where we are seeing so many more people using mobile phones, iPhones, smartphones, in order to communicate and relying on that as their only computer within their pocket, we need to make sure that we're thinking about those things and responding to the needs and the practical needs of what our community is already looking for. And so those are some of the things that I can institute changes on. I am not planning on going in there and making a bunch of changes that are unreasonable. We will be working with stakeholders. We will be talking with the staff that has institutional knowledge, making sure that we are making decisions that are productive for our community before we're making those changes. And so I want to rest assured to anybody who is concerned that I'm going to go in there and change up a bunch of things without any forethought, you know, give me a little more credit than that. The things that I don't have control over that I do want to touch on before we get to questions are things that I support, such as automatic voter registration, which of course would go through the motor vehicle division. Anybody who has who's eligible would be able to be registered automatically. This is something that other states have done, and anybody with any maybe religious reasons or whatever reasons would be able to opt out, and nobody would be put in any particular party. It would be no party designated until they change it. That just creates one less barrier for motivated people when they show up to vote. They should be able, if they're motivated and they show up and they're eligible, they should be able to cast their ballot. The other thing is same-day voter registration. I strongly support this as well. We are living in a technological age. We're also living in a time where evictions are at a high rate, and they're going to continue. We're going to continue to see so much of our vulnerable community members moving around, and our low income brothers and sisters who are just going to be struggling. In 29 days, a 29-day waiting period is a lifetime for somebody in that situation. It doesn't mean that that they don't still deserve the right to vote or participate in our elections. They absolutely do. In fact, even more so, because they may be people who are most directly impacted by everyday legislation. They need to be able to be given the opportunity to participate. And so same-day voter registration, I've only heard one person who has ever pushed back that you know, people need to be informed. They can't just decide to vote and then vote that same day. They have to be informed. That, I think, it really teeters on the same idea of those literacy tests, the you know, who is qualified to vote and how, and it's not up to us to make those decisions. But as far as blocking and creating barriers or removing barriers for people, I absolutely support that. And with our technology age, that is something that we can do. We can push for that. The other thing that I strongly support is rights restoration for people with felonies. We are talking about criminal justice in Arizona. So often it impacts every single thing that we touch in Arizona. Arizona has become part of the prison industrial complex that is not only targeting Black and brown people, but also incarcerating them and putting harsher and longer sentences on Black people and people of color. What that also means is we have a high rate of felonies. And when we have people who then come out of prison, they struggle to find housing, they struggle to find a job, they might end up most dependent on the system, but they're least able to make decisions about what those services are. And it's generational, and it has a generational impact. And that's something that we're not talking about. As I said, part of what I am extremely skilled in is community building and raising attention to issues, as well as creating a sense of urgency for them. When we are breaking these concepts down and talking with them, with the general public, and sharing with people why we feel this is wrong, that's how we're able to change the conversation. part of my goals within this entire run, I have had two goals. Number one is to become the next Pima County Recorder, but my second goal is to change the conversation. And we've already done that. My Democratic opponent it now shares almost all the same talking points as I do, but did not start there. Was not centering these populations of people that I was talking about. That is what happens when you have somebody who thinks differently come into this space. And so I've already been able to do so much of that as unpaid labor, as a volunteer in the Democratic Party. I'm the current president of the Progressive Democrats of Southern Arizona. I'm the vice chair of the Native American Caucus. I'm the co-founder of an organization called Indivisible Tohono that's specifically focused on providing opportunities for education and civic engagements for Native American people. I am a precinct committeeman. I'm a state committee person. I have sat on the Pima County EC Executive Committee, and as well as the statewide. I'm very invested in how we can create positive change, but the only way we can do that is by including others, by bringing others in there, and inspiring people to be able to feel as if they are represented and they are a part of what is happening. That is what my campaign has been representing. As far as transition, I have talked with FN Rodriguez. I have taken a tour and had one-on-one sit-downs where we have talked about what his, what needs to happen. FN, she replaced Mike Boyd, who took all of the furniture from the office, was not willing to help with any type of transition. In fact, he took all the furniture, to make it more difficult, purposefully did that. I have been building relationships for years with not only the Pima County Recorder's Office, the Pinal County Recorders, the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. There is a support system that will be in place, and I have no concern about, I don't want to negate and say that it's not going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge, but I feel confident that if we really care about the things that I'm pushing forward, that we are talking and centering about needs of community members, and we are trying to reach an audience that we have never been able to reach before. You cannot simply walk in and say, I'm going to community build and not have any of that infrastructure that I have been building for years. We are not able to just simply tap into that. And so that is what my candidacy represents, and I hope that you can join me. You can learn more at GabriellaForRecorder.org, and I will go ahead and answer any questions that are there.
All right, terrific. I've got lots of questions. In fact, a question that's been asked 3 times is that the recorder's office is huge. It has 50 permanent staff and 150 temporary employees. Tell us about your experience, managing large organizations and how you would approach the recorder's office.
Right. So I have formal training in leadership in particular, and I do, this is an area of growth for me for managing. I have only been given unofficial management type positions. I see a trend where I am often given positions that require the need for collaboration with others, but sometimes not always the title or the pay. And so One of the things that I am concerned about is the high rate of turnover from this office. There is a consistent institutional knowledge, but there is a high turnover as well. And being able to find out what is going on there and recruit people who are in these positions, and I'm not talking about the temporary employees, I'm talking about the permanent staff. Being able to address the needs of those employees, I think, is really important. It has to do with creating a sense of culture, it's creating a sense of support, and making sure that we're implementing the needs of our employees so that they can be successful, so that they can feel growth, so that they can feel that they're a part of this larger movement. Making sure that we have even a vision and mission is something that I think is really strange. Maybe they might have one listed, within the office, but to not have that as a driving force listed on a website, that this is what the recorder's office does, this is your job, this is our mission together, that is something that has been brought to my attention, very, very concerning, that I think with being able to, with my organization skills, being able to connect with people, being able to work with multiple entities and bring people together is something that I'm very skilled at being able to do.
All right. We have a question from Lillian Fox, and she says, I believe the county recorder's office is responsible for drawing the districts for the county supervisors. What can you do to ensure that the county supervisor districts will be redrawn in the fairest possible way so that there will be no favoritism?
So redistricting, first of all, is a huge undertaking. First, let me just say, if you have not filled out your census forms, you really need to fill that out so we know who is living here in the community. That is something that a lot of people have kind of put on the back burner during this time. A lot of people are very confused on it. I don't hear people talking about, what if you are a Canadian resident and you're just here 7 months of the year? Yes, you should be filling it out. If it's 6 months and a day, you should be filling it out. There's no Canadian census. There's no questions about citizenship. It's about who's here, who's utilizing those resources, who's driving on our roads, who's using our hospitals. Now more than ever, that's extremely important. But breaking down that information and making sure that people are understanding. So we're already doing that work of making sure that people are being counted, that we're able to accurately capture how many people are living within our district, or living within the state, or living within the country, is extremely important. But one of the things that I constantly hear in regards to redistricting is, well, we reached out to these organizations and nobody showed up. We reached out to this population of people who, might be impacted. It's super important. We don't understand why they're not showing up to these meetings. We give them the opportunities. But when we're talking about especially vulnerable communities who might have a say, who might have a vested interest in participating, we have not been doing the work of community building, of reaching out to our community and explaining what these concepts are. They might, we are in a bubble. We are meeting online at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock on a Monday via Zoom to talk politics. We are not the average American. And so when we're talking to people who might be outside of politics and we're asking for their input, we really have to make sure that we're talking to them in a language that is understandable and that most people can relate to, and that they can be conveyed the importance of this type of process, because they should be involved. And so being able to bring in stakeholders and to convey to others the importance of what is happening and how it's going to directly impact their daily lives is something that I'm able to bring to the table that others cannot.
All right. Let's see, we've got a whole bunch of questions here. Let me just look. Okay, two questions from Lee Oler. One concerns portable voting booths and giving people actual addresses so they can vote by mail. So Lee asks, let me just see if I can find it here. Navajo County in Arizona, up by Pine Top and Lakeside, has a portable voting booth that goes to the registered voters. She would like to know your opinion about that. And let me get part two of her question. And she adds that also the Navajo in Utah and Arizona have projects to give people actual addresses so they can get U.S. mail, including vote by mail ballots. What do you think about these two initiatives?
I love them. Actually, Pinal County also has a mobile voting unit, which is super exciting, and I would love. Before the pandemic, I had been following everything that the Secretary of State has been putting out and Pinal County has been putting out about this mobile voting unit. I'm very interested. One of the things that I have heard recently is in order to have the mobile voting unit come to you, however, is you have to fill out a form online, and they basically want you to create an event to draw people in to come to that mobile unit. I think this is a real opportunity for growth. I don't think that they have really worked out all the kinks yet, because if you do request this to happen, you're not given a checklist, you're not given the tools to make flyers or told these are the places where you should be advertising or anything like that. And so that's something that I think this is in the early infancy for Pinal County to have that, and I think that it's only going to get better. So definitely, we do need to be trying different things. As far as rural and tribal communities, I come from the Tohono O'odham Nation, which is the size of Connecticut. It's the size of Connecticut without the road structure. So the majority of the Tohono O'odham Nation sits within Pima County. Just a small bit is in Pinal and just another small chunk is in Maricopa, but the majority of it is Pima County. And so a lot of people are really confused by this, but we have been living in this area since time immemorial. And so we had these areas where we live before roads, before there was a need for roads, before there was a need, before wagons. So that is why it's so spread out, and we have ties to the land. We're not going to be moving, but it is an issue to have physical addresses. For example, to give the address of where I grew up, I don't know it. It is Highway 86 milepost 20 off Indian Route 15. I'm not really sure. So that is something that I've never used, that convention of having a physical address. And so instead I can say I'm from the village of Bisimo'o, and you could get to Bisimo'o, but you wouldn't be able to find my house with those directions. And so that is something that's very confusing for people. But there is a system, there's this geocoding that is starting to be used, where they use grid lines, latitude and longitude geocodes. It's a unique code that can be printed on a little placard and put at the top of your house, and you would be able to receive, UPS or FedEx or whatever. Because people would be able to find your direct house. And so I think those are definitely things that could happen, but it is very expensive. And we have to determine, who is paying for that and who is educating people about what this is and how it's being utilized. And again, that's really dependent on relationship building with tribes, making sure that people are understanding what it is that you're trying to do and the benefits for the community.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Paul Stapleton Smith. He points out that you are the labor union candidate backed by the Arizona AFL-CIO and affiliated unions. And his question is about the IBEW, which is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, is in a contract with the state Democratic Party to make registration and get out the vote efforts. Do you think that this contract will make the get out the vote efforts more effective?
I think, well, yes, and thank you so much for the question. I think that any partner that is working to do, there's so many groups that have been doing the boots on the ground work of registering voters, and we have not always been supportive of that. We have not been providing opportunities for trainings, like I said, for even someone like myself who simply found this passion just by registering voters and wanted to attend trainings. I was having a hard time accessing that. Being able to receive the materials that you need. One of the really big concerns that I had early on, and this is something that I was really shocked to know that the recorder's office understood and knew about, and haven't changed their procedures in regards to this. But organizations such as Lucha, Living United for Change in Arizona, which has endorsed me, by the way, and Mi Familia Vota, organizations that are specifically targeting Latino communities, Latinx communities, would maybe register 100 voters or so, go to turn them in, and they would get 10 blank forms back because of policy. Because the recorder's office was concerned about accountability. So they would give 10 forms. And so what this organization would have to do, and this was part of their procedures, daily procedures, would be to go to a library site and take their blank forms in order to have enough forms needed for their volunteers to go out into Latino communities and register voters. So making sure that we are not only addressing the needs, but we are specifically being proactive and making sure that we are being supportive of any organizations that are doing the work. And that does include the Republican Party, the Green Party, whoever is out there registering voters and trying to help until we can get the automatic voter and same-day voter registration. We're still going to have the need to provide voter registration if we have both of those things, because there are people that are not in that system or are not captured somehow. But to provide more support for organizations who are doing that type of work is of the utmost importance, and they save the county millions of dollars by doing the legwork, and so we do need to support them in any way we can.
All right, thank you, Gabby. We're getting near the end time of our program, and I wonder if, and so I didn't get to ask all the questions that were asked. Would you please close out the program, give us a summary, and tell us how people can send you questions for you to answer?
So thank you for having me today and for allowing me to share all of the information that I have. You can learn more about me by visiting my website, GabriellaForRecorder.org. That's Gabriella with 2 L's and the word for spelled out, recorder spelled out, GabriellaForRecorder.org. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even TikTok, which is a new platform that I've been having a lot of fun with. Or you can feel free to give us a call or send us an email, GabriellaForRecorder@gmail.com. Right now, we are in the last 9-day push. We are out dropping literature every day. We are making phone calls. We are out getting out in the community. If you've liked any of the things that I have shared today, please just make sure that you're posting or you're sharing about it or you're talking with your friends in whatever ways that you communicate would be much appreciated. One question has been about the Indigenous Woman Coming Through sticker. There is a viral video that you can take a look at on my website that explains where these stickers come from, but it is the campaign mantra, Indigenous Woman Coming Through. We're coming through whether you like it or not, and it would be much appreciated if we'd have your support. When I win, I'll be the first Native American to hold an elected countywide seat, which is it's bittersweet. That's wonderful, and at the same time, it's well past time. I'm not asking you to vote for me because I'm Native American. I'm asking you to vote for me because I'm experienced, I'm qualified, I'm creative, and I'm skilled at community building and creating a sense of urgency towards issues that directly impact our constituents. The cherry on top is that I'm Native American and have access to communities that all of you are working so hard to include. And I just want to thank you all for the hard work that you are all doing. All of us, we're all in this together as Democrats, and I know that we are going to be so successful in November because of all of our hard work. And so thank you so much for participating and for coming and listening to me today. And I hope to have your support.
Well, that was wonderful. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy campaign to talk to all the loyal Democrats here, Democrats of Greater Tucson. And I want to thank you very much and wish you all the best luck in your campaign.
Thank you so much, Larry.
All right. Bye-bye.